Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant. I'm Graham Houston Matthews, and today we're breaking down the 1997 WWE SummerSlam pay-per-view event as seen on the WWE Network. Now, this was probably my favorite SummerSlam up to this point, other than the 1992 edition. Way better than 95. I think anything's better than 95 at this point. 96 was good, like I talked about. The final two matches kind of made that show worth watching. But this show, while not perfect, was very enjoyable on the whole. So kicking off the show, a steel cage match between Mankind and Hunter Hearst Helmsley with Chyna in Triple H's corner. This is, of course, before he would become known as Triple H. And I've talked about before, the year prior at 96, to open up the show, we had Savio Vega versus Owen Hart. And, we have these nice little openers, these good matches. 1-2-3 Kid versus Hakushi from SummerSlam 1995. Nice little openers and whatnot. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's different from opening like a Raw. In my opinion, pay-per-views and episodes of Raw are way different. But, nowadays, I'm such a huge fan of having a wrestling show kick off with, a wrestling match. That's what kind of hooks the audience. And a Raw you can turn off, a pay-per-view you order, so you're watching the whole thing anyway. But I feel like kind of switching up the formula a little bit by not having this, a random undercard match. I know it's traditional to have the matches that don't mean anything kick off the show. That's kind of been erased more and more over the last couple of years. Usually nowadays we have these exciting matches for the most part kicking off the show. Like at WrestleMania 30 was Triple H versus Daniel Bryan, the least important match on that show. Not at all. If it was, if we were going to go in that order, the Divas match probably would have kicked off WrestleMania 30. You know what I mean? It's like the same kind of thing. That's why I love this match placement for the steel cage match, because it kicked off the show with a bang. You could have put it in the second to last match on the card in that slot, but it was so perfect in kicking off the show with a huge bang. I thought it was a great match, very enjoyable. Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Mankind had a really good feud going on at that point, with Mankind being the lovable babyface, kind of going to dude love mode after the matchup, which was kind of funny after he won. A very close call, Mankind pulling a Jimmy Superfly Snuka. And of course, Mick Foley got into wrestling because of the steel cage match between Snuka and Don Morocco from the 80s, I believe it was. And I think for the Intercontinental Championship, that was in the best of the Intercontinental title DVD that I own. And when he jumped off the top of the steel cage, of course, the very famous, notable moment when he jumps off the top of the steel cage, Snuka that is, and hits the top rope splash off the top of the cage. Mankind wanted to replicate that moment. While this pay-per-view did not take place in MSG, it did take place pretty close by in East Rutherford, New Jersey, in the Continental Airlines Arena. So it was a really cool moment for Mankind. You would think that he almost had the match won, and he went back in the ring, hit the top rope elbow off the top of the steel cage. It was a great moment, easily the highlight of the matchup, no pun intended. And you would think that because he did that, Booking 101 says, Wrestling 101 says that, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, because Mankind cost himself the win, that Triple H would win. That was not the case. Mankind, after hitting that move, went, I don't know if it was right afterwards, but towards the end of the matchup, he was crawling out the door. Triple H was going over the top of this cage. Maybe it was vice versa, but I know they were kind of racing to get to the floor. And Mankind, ultimately, just by a second ahead, ended up winning the matchup, and like I said, going to dude love mode afterwards with the music hitting and whatever else. It was pretty funny. I don't know why that happened. It was kind of random. I know at that point he was still doing he was teaming with Stone Cold. He was doing a tag team with him as Dude Love. But still, a really, really good match to kick off the show, and easily one of the best, if not the best opening, one of the best openers in SummerSlam history up to this point. Right after this, we had Goldust taking on Brian Pillman, with the stipulation being that if Brian Pillman lost, he would have to wear a dress on Raw the next night. Marlena's dress, that is. Marlena, during this match, had a mannequin on the outside wearing the dress, and I was like, what is the purpose of that? Then I realized the stipulation of the matchup. Then I found out what it was, and it made much more sense. The match was good. Goldust at this point was not in great shape at all. That 97, 98 era, he was very chunky for the most part. I don't know what it was. He lost his figure. Not lost his figure, but he wasn't in the same best of shape that he was during the Attitude Era as he was early on in his career, and is certainly not now. But that's something I noticed while watching the Attitude Era pay-per-views. But yeah, a decent match. Otherwise, he was still a really good wrestler. Brian Pillman was always a great competitor as well. The match wasn't really, it was your typical undercard match, but I think what made the outcome, or made the match more meaningful, kind of made me care about it a little bit more, was the stipulation. It was something silly. It wasn't a championship or a number one contenders match or anything like that at stake, but it was something. It was something that made you care about this match a little bit more, made you want to see Goldust win just to see Brian Pillman wear the dress the next night on Raw. And Goldust did end up winning with a little help from Marlena. The match, or the finish of the match, was botched just a little bit. I don't know what they were going for. I think Pillman was like in a flip over Goldust or something. He had his legs pinned, and he wasn't quite near the end of the ropes, and he had to inch over it a little bit, and it looked so staged. I mean, that is wrestling, but it kind of looked more choreographed than usual. And because his head was outside the ropes, part of my botch, Marlena knocks him over the head with the top of the mannequin head and allows Goldust to pick up the victory when the referee was not looking, or the vision was impaired, as whatever they would say. So Goldust wins the match. After the match, Marlena puts the mannequin inside the ring as her and Goldust run off, and Pillman destroys the mannequin in the middle of the ring, and thus setting the stage for the next night's Raw when he would have to wear the dress, or I don't know if he would or not, but a good match, and like I said before, kind of made me care a little bit more about the outcome with the stipulation at stake. Up next, a tag team match pitting the Legion of Doom against the Godwins. A decent match, nothing really at stake, unlike the the previous match, no tag team titles, no nothing. But it was a good match. The Legion of Doom were, oh man, even at this point they were still over. I mean, I enjoyed their 80s work in the Attitude Era, but they were still at their peak at this point. They were still in the prime of their careers, putting on good matches. Not great, but they were still contesting some pretty solid matches, this one being no exception. And a decent match. The Godwins, I was never really too high on. I mean, they were a good team, but I never really was always thoroughly, and watching these old pay-per-views was never captivated by any of their matches, and this was kind of the same thing. A good match, nothing huge, but nice little tag team action for what it was. Up next for the European Championship, the British Bulldog defending the gold against Ken Shamrock. And this match was just all out a freaking brawl. And that's why I loved it. Ken Shamrock is crazy. British Bulldog, after having an instant classic in the main event of SummerSlam 5 years prior in England, where he won the IC Championship. 5 years later, having a completely different match with Ken Shamrock, which I think kind of suit both of their styles. Bulldog, while he was a brawler, while he was a great wrestler, he could brawl as well. And that was exactly the kind of match that these two had right here. I thoroughly enjoyed this. The match didn't go too long before Ken Shamrock just went berserk and just went crazy on the Bulldog, getting himself disqualified in the process. And also the stipulation for this match, other than the European Championship being on the line, was that if the British Bulldog lost, he would have to eat dog food after the match. So that was an interesting stipulation. They kind of touched upon that in the pre-match video package, but yeah, I really liked this match. Again, it wasn't like a 5-star match classic, but it didn't need to be. It was exactly what you would expect from a Ken Shamrock Bulldog match, just an all-out brawl. And after Ken Shamrock got himself disqualified, out come the officials and the referees, and Shamrock, in typical Shamrock fashion, just goes nuts on everybody. All the referees just suplexing everybody. This was Suplex City before there was Suplex City. That before Brock Lesnar was the mayor, Ken Shamrock was the mayor of Suplex City. I thought this was great, very entertaining stuff. I mean, we got the fuck finish, the DQ finish, but it fit perfectly for the style and the persona of Ken Shamrock, just costing himself the win, and Bulldog would not have to eat dog food after the match because he technically did win this match and retain his European Championship. Up next, an 8-man tag team action, Los Borucas, I think I'm mispronouncing that, but it consisted of Savio Vega, Miguel Perez Jr., Jose Estrada Jr., Jesus Castillo, taking on the team of the Disciples of the Apocalypse, which consisted of Crush, Chains, 8-Ball, and Skull. This was both a fun match and just an all-out train wreck. At some points, I just had no idea what was going on. I knew nothing about the other team. I knew something about the Disciples of Apocalypse. I knew some, a few different things about the different members, but Los Borucas, or however you pronounce that, I knew nothing about these guys. I know nothing. I've never heard of them before. I've never seen them in action before. Of course, I know Savio Vega. I have no idea who the other guys were, though. Maybe that's what hindered my enjoyment of this match, but even taking that away, it wasn't a fantastic match. I think it was just kind of just chaos, which I know what was the Attitude Era was all about, and this was kind of the I don't know when you would specify, pinpoint when the Attitude Era really kind of kicked off. Some people would say early 97 or the Montreal Screwjob later on that year, but this was kind of on the cusp, on the brink of the Attitude Era, and it wasn't a great match. Maybe some people enjoy it maybe more than I did, but it was just kind of all chaos and whatever. You never knew who was the legal man. People were just kind of attacking one another just randomly, and there was a lot of outside interference. Just a frickin' train wreck is what I can use to describe this. Not terrible, like I said, some people will like this more than others, myself included. I mean, being in the category that didn't really take any enjoyment out of this. But it was what it was, and the team of Los Barucas ended up going over and beating the Disciples of Apocalypse for whatever that was worth. Like I said, you might enjoy it. I didn't, but it wasn't terrible, to say the least. Up next, the Intercontinental Championship. Stone Cold Steve Austin contending for the gold against Owen Hart. In a really good match up until the finish. Of course, this was the infamous pay-per-view where Stone Cold Steve Austin broke his neck in this matchup towards the end of the contest. And you can definitely tell how very different the in-ring styles were of Stone Cold Steve Austin before the neck injury and then after. This match was very well wrestled. I thought it was even better wrestled than the main event, which kind of told a different story, and I'll get to that in a couple minutes. But the in-ring style that Stone Cold would adhere to during his matches was vastly different between the two periods of his career, before the injury and post-injury. And here with Owen Hart, I thought they contested a great match. Like I've always said, Owen Hart was very underrated in my opinion. Could he have been a world champion? I think so, maybe in 94 or 95 when he was kind of a hotter heel. I mean, he was still a great heel back in 97. I remember watching the SummerSlam is this show, but Survivor Series 97, the same night as the Montreal Screwjob, where he lost back the Intercontinental Championship to Stone Cold Steve Austin, but he came out wearing a t-shirt that said, Owen Hart 316, or whatever it said was, Owen Hart just broke your neck, or whatever it was, and I thought that was hilarious, and I talked about that in my 1997 review of SummerSlam. But yeah, I thought this was a great match up until the finish, of course, as I mentioned, when Owen Hart kind of reversed whatever Stone Cold was going for, or he was going for maybe a side slam or whatever. He reversed it into a pile driver, and maybe he slipped out of his hands. I know, but however the story goes, he slipped a little bit, and Austin's neck hit the mat, thus paralyzing him for a couple minutes. And Austin couldn't get up, and you could definitely tell there was something wrong. I mean, kind of watching it back, already knowing what was going to happen, you can already kind of pinpoint. But maybe watching it live for those that were, fans at this period in time, I don't know if you could tell whether there was something wrong or whether you thought that Austin was just working the injury. I have no idea. But the finish came off terribly, understandably so. But after Austin was kind of laying on the mat, motionless for about a minute or two, Owen Hart was just kind of jabbing with the fans and, just kind of throwing verbal jabs at the fans and whatever else, while the referee was talking to Stone Cold on the ground. And they kind of improvised the finish with Owen Hart just kind of standing there. Austin barely inches over, rolls him up, and as Austin would put it, one of the worst roll-ups in wrestling history, to pick up the win and win the Intercontinental Championship. Now, I know they didn't want to change plans. They could have easily just had the match go to a no contest. I think that probably would have been better than having Owen Hart, than having whatever they did. I know they wanted to kind of stick to their plans. They probably didn't know how bad the injury was, thinking, okay, maybe Stone Cold can win here and he'll be fine after the match, and it was actually a lot worse than they probably anticipated it was. But I think it probably would have put more heat on Owen Hart had they just ended the match right there, had Owen Hart win via referee stoppage or whatever, kept the title on him, because like I mentioned, they would put the title right back on Owen Hart. Or Stone Cold Steve Austin, I think, won back the championship at Survivor Series, and Owen Hart, I think they put the title right back on him after Austin got injured, so the title change was kind of pointless. I know, like I said, they probably did not know how bad the injury was, and had they known beforehand, before the finish, how long Austin was going to be out, they probably would have called an audible and had Owen Hart retain. It would have made that much of a difference, but the finish came off terribly, but like I said, I'm not trashing it because the guy broke his neck. Whatever, what else do you expect? And like I said, they probably would have changed it had they known beforehand what happened here. I mean, had they known that Austin broke his neck and it wasn't just a stinger, always going to be okay, he'll be ready for Raw tomorrow. If they knew what actually happened here, they probably would have changed the finish. But still, that was a very scary spot. But before that, though, on a lighter note, it was a really good match between Austin and Owen Hart, and the final match of Stone Cold's that he would kind of, as they mentioned earlier, kind of adhere to that wrestling style. After this, he would kind of change up his wrestling arsenal to kind of to fit the neck injury that he had, to kind of fit that injury that he had, and he'd do more brawling and kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Kind of change up his arsenal to the point where he could not do the same stuff that he was doing during the course of this contest because of the neck injury that he suffered at the end of this match. So we get to the main event for the WWF Championship. Undertaker defending the WWE Championship against Bret Hart with Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. Now, while I thought the previous match, before the injury obviously, was better wrestled, this was a well-wrestled matchup, very well wrestled, but I thought what I took away from this match more so than the wrestling aspect of it was the story they were trying to tell. Bret Hart was kind of this whiny, bitchy heel, kind of going back to the quote-unquote pipe bomb that he dropped right before WrestleMania that year, WrestleMania 13. The promo that he cut right before WrestleMania on Raw where he just went on a massive rant and he shoved down Vince McMahon right after that steel cage match. Great stuff, and that was kind of hinting and the slow burning heel turn that Bret Hart was undergoing at that point. So he was kind of the heel going into this matchup. Undertaker was the babyface that people wanted to see win. And Shawn Michaels having issues with only Bret Hart. This was right before the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had their feud in the fall of that year. He was supposed to be impartial, and he was throughout most of the matchup because the stipulation was that had Bret Hart lost here, that he would never ever be able to wrestle on American soil again. And if Shawn Michaels sided with the Undertaker, then and caused him to win, then Shawn Michaels would never be able to wrestle in America again. Kind of a silly stipulation, considering that's never going to happen. Even if that did happen, like John Cena being fired, it's not actually going to happen. They're just going to go back on their word the next night on Raw, change up the rules, or just completely abolish it or whatever, expunge the loss. So that was kind of a weird stipulation in that you kind of knew that Bret Hart was going to win here. But it was fitting of the feud, though, because Bret Hart was saying for weeks and months that Canada was superior to the United States. It was kind of what triggered his heel turn throughout the summer of 1997. But what side that Shawn Michaels would side, who he would side with in this contest, The Undertaker or Bret Hart, was kind of the big selling point of this contest. And they ended up going almost 30 minutes. I thought it was a really good match. Great, I don't know, maybe they would have different matches or different, I thought it was a very well-wrestled match, but even more so than the wrestling itself, as I mentioned, was this story they were trying to tell, with Bret Hart kind of resorting to any underhanded tactic necessary to win that WWF Championship, and he would hit Undertaker with a steel chair. That wouldn't win him the title, but the finish came when Shawn Michaels was going to swing the chair at Bret Hart. Bret Hart moved, and he would end up hitting Bret Hart. He would end up hitting The Undertaker instead, costing him the match and the championship. Bret Hart got the cover, and Shawn Michaels reluctantly counting to 3, giving Bret Hart the victory and the WWF Championship, setting up the subsequent feud between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker for the fall, and also kind of planting the seeds for the rematch between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart at Survivor Series that year, otherwise known as the Montreal Screwjob. But a very good way of going out the show. Overall, I thought this was a very enjoyable, entertaining show. As I mentioned in my 96 review or my 95 review, I don't remember which one it was, that going into the Attitude Era, these shows would be getting better and better. This show I really enjoyed. I'm already halfway through 98, and that's already been a good show. So I'm looking forward to the up-and-coming installments of SummerSlam as we continue along here with my reviews of the event as the road to SummerSlam 2015 rages on. But that's it for my review of SummerSlam. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I always appreciate it. Make sure to go back and check out this pay-per-view on the WWE Network. Well worth going out of your way to see. And as I mentioned, probably my favorite next to the 92 installment, if not even more enjoyable than that show. I thought the crowd was great. The matches were good to great as well. The final 2 matches were very good. We had an awesome opener, and the undercard wasn't too bad as well. Enjoyed this show. Definitely go back on the network and watch it for yourself. And we'll be back on Saturday with my full review of SummerSlam 1998. But in the meantime, and in between time, you can follow me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to find me on Facebook. Give the page an old thumbs up at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. As I mentioned, all support is greatly appreciated. Have a great rest of your week, folks. And as I mentioned, Saturday, my 1998 review of SummerSlam. Until then, have an awesome week, and I'll catch you folks down the road.